including the so-called latte levy. What's the right age to let teens go on holiday by themselves? And is it time for all workers to be given the right to switch off? Plus, we review a messy and tender new comedy written by and starring a tetraplegic woman. Blockley and Herald columnist Brian Beacom. Good morning to you all.
Good morning.
Morning.
And this week we're talking about Kamala Harris vowing a new way forward as she accepts her Democratic nomination. Would the so-called latte levy change your daily coffee habits? What's the right age to let teens go on holiday by themselves? And is it time for all workers to be given the right to switch off? Plus, as Delia Smith says, today's youth don't know the joy of a good pork chop. Why are Gen Z falling out of love with those simple staples? First, let's have a listen to some of this week's big moments.
Be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security.
Surprise! Feels really nice having you here.
This isn't your home.
We have to make this work. I'm with the guy I've always wanted in the city. I have always
wondered whether it worked with you down there.
Oh, it works.
This is important. This creates and shapes and changes people's views of disabled people and also of themselves.
If you look at people on the street today, they are very used to having this kind of like reusable cups, whether it's to hold water with them.
All you need to know is if you think of an animal, think of me, this half, that half. This half up here drags the other half along. So this does all the hard work. And this is the meat that's tougher and needs longer cooking.
Is that too orange for you?
It's a little bit orange, but I'm going to embrace the orange.
It does make me realise that you can be much bolder.
All that and more to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Shereen Nanjiani. Get in touch with your thoughts on anything we're talking about this morning. You can drop me a text on 80295. That's charged at your standard message rate, or use the hashtag Shereen on social media. But first today, a new comedy drama for BBC Two this week, created by and starring Kyla Harris as Freya, a 30-something Canadian tetraplegic who moves to London to be with her new lover. Well, joining them for the ride, her chaotic best mate, and so begin the adventures of an awkward blended family. It's described as a messy, tender comedy. So let's get a flavour of We Might Regret This.
Surprise! Feels really nice having you here.
This isn't your home.
We have to make this work. I'm with the guy I've always wanted in the city. I have always
Wondered whether it worked with you down there.
Oh, it works.
Another one having a midlife crisis,
Albeit
a very inclusive one.
Brands are dying to put you in their ads. As a proud, white, disabled woman.
I'm not white. Who is? What do you reckon? You get to take over the world? I might need to pee first.
Well, that gives you a flavour of We Might Regret This. There is a lot that we cannot broadcast at this time on a Saturday morning. It really does launch right in there. But it is very, very different to what we normally see on TV. And I heard Kyla Harris, I keep wanting to call her Kamala Harris. Kyla Harris, the co-writer of this, saying that she thinks this is the first comedy written by a wheelchair user. Yet it's not, Brian, really about disability and caregiving. It's about much more than that.
Yeah. They managed to achieve just such an incredible balance. What it does is it features the life of this person who is disabled, but it's because it's so much focused on the relationship between her and their carer, which is what the relationship was actually between Kyla Harris and Lee Getty, the writer. These were two women who met in Vancouver a long time ago, and Getty became her carer for a period of time, but they were also close friends. They were so close friends they got matching tattoos. They were real sisters together. So they came up with the idea of exploring this notion. The whole notion is about what kind of relationship can you have with your best friend who happens to have to do really intimate things to you and with you. So that's really incredible. So although you have this constant focus, you realise that this is a person in a wheelchair. What it's not about is how the disability has really impacted on her life to the extent that she can't be in control. And what they've done so cleverly is build a sitcom all the way around this, where all the characters seem to be more dysfunctional, more chaotic and more confused than she is.
Yeah.
She's the one with the power, and that's the way it's coming through. But it's incredibly funny, and I think what they do is so well is they look to the darkness, they look to the difficulty of installing a catheter, about emptying bowels. They treat all that with such fun and consideration that it really does come across well. And what it does overall impact is to have people look at it and say, well, you can be disabled, you can still have a life, you can certainly have sex, because she has lots of that in the series, and she can do other things that you probably wouldn't anticipate.
Yeah, a great supporting cast as well. We've got Darren Boyd as her boyfriend. He's always worth watching. He's a much older boyfriend, and that there's always jokes being made about that as well.
Yeah,
and Sally Phillips as the ex-wife, and there's a there's a backstory to them that we won't give too much away about. How did you think this worked? Because there's some quite dark themes in here as well, but it is a comedy.
Yeah, it is. And I thought actually what was just mentioned about the fact that it's so much more about all the relationships around her, all the dysfunction, the darkness, like you mentioned, which we won't go into because the spoiler alert, but all that's going on around her gives so much richness to the story. And of course, it's great acting and some great performances in there. And it is funny, it is a comedy. I don't think I really there was one scene in the first episode I sort of laughed out loud. It gets funnier as it goes along. As you find out more about the darkness, that actually seems to bring out more of the humour in it.
Right.
And it's very, very cleverly done in which our lead character is kind of in the centre, and then there's all this madness and all this dysfunction going on around her. And then you've got this really intimate relationship and women are best friend, and best friendships are so precious. But another layer on that is the element of having to care for someone. And there's also a really good scene I really liked where the old carer was talking to the new carer, the best friend, and the best friend implied that she'd like pushed our lead character off a bridge, and that's why she was in the wheelchair.
Right.
And I was like, that is just so dark, so dark. I mean, I actually put my hand in front of my face when I was watching it. I was like, no, you didn't. And it's that kind of humor all the way through. It's really, really worth watching.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Afia says it gets funnier, it gets more layered as it goes on. You're not quite there yet with the first episode.
No, and I've heard, you know, that it gets better, and I'm willing to stick with it. But I think that for me personally, I mean, I thought when I watched the first episode, the funny thing is I thought the story was interesting,
right?
And I was very, very happy to see a disabled lead character. Incredibly happy to see that, but I don't know, it was just the humour just wasn't. I mean, there was little moments, the one I first mentioned. There was another one as well where they were talking to two of the kind of fashion execs, and they were both called Olivia.
Yes.
There was that. There was
very posh girls, yeah.
There was little moments like that tickled me, but there was so many other jokes that for me just I would have preferred if they weren't there and they actually carried on the story or went into a bit more backstory with certain characters. But maybe they will do that in future episodes.
Yeah.
I don't know. But
well, I heard the creator Kyla Harris, who also plays Freya in the lead role, speaking to BBC Radio 5 Live yesterday, and she was talking about why making this was important to her.
You know, when I had my accident, I was 15 years old, and I didn't know anyone who was a wheelchair user. I thought I didn't know anyone who was disabled. But being disabled has really expanded my definition of what it means to be disabled. And when my, you know, very stereotypically, the doctor came in and told my mum and I that I would never walk again, my immediate reaction was, well, then I don't want to live. And I think over the years, I just started getting on with life. There wasn't a time where I thought kind of, oh, this is too much, I can't handle this. And that made me reflect on why I had that initial reaction. If I hadn't known any wheelchair users before, if I hadn't known what it meant to be disabled, then why did I react so strongly to it? And the only thing that I could think of was the media. It's the media that I have consumed unconsciously. And we really wanted to create this so that another 15-year-old who had an accident wouldn't think the same thing, that they'd see themselves represented, that they'd see that there's such joy and humor and complexity to being disabled. This is important. This creates and shapes and changes people's views of disabled people and also of themselves.
Yeah, it's such an important point, that, Brian. You've got to see it to be it, and you know, a positive representation.
Yeah, a positive, but I think one of the words that I never used in probably describing this was honesty. It gives an impression, maybe I gave an impression earlier on, that Freya and her friend who becomes her carer are all nice and cosy with each other, but they're not. They actually abuse each other all the time, as two good friends do, and especially two friends who are tested in such a way, and they reach into that darkness all the time and they expose each other, but then at the end of the day they have a laugh and a cuddle, and they love each other so well, so closely.
Yeah, Afia, sorry.
I mean, I completely hear our point about wanting to be representative. You know, there's that phrase, you cannot be what you do not see, but this is not suitable for any 15-year-old.
Well, we should have said that. Absolutely. It's,
yes.
and we'll come to what's suitable for 15-year-olds when we talk about teenage travel as well later on. But yes, maybe there is a bit of a parental advisory on this. Yeah.
And I think what you've got to consider also, I'm picking out in you in this, I don't know how we couldn't laugh when you get lines that come in through subsidiary characters. Abe's son is a displaced young man. He's 28 and he's lost. So Abe goes out and he buys him a burger van. And the boy looks at it and he's shocked. This old battered out burger van. And he says, "Why couldn't you have set me up in photography like the Beckhams did with their useless son?" and that's quite on the nose. That's quite heavy and quite hard hitting, but it's funny.
Right. Can you be persuaded to stick with it?
I'm going to stick with it.
We bullied you into it.
Yeah.
We bullied you into it. And I absolutely, I take Afia's point about, it is great to see that representing a disabled-led story, but maybe 15 is a little young. It continues on the BBC. All episodes, I think there's 6 episodes and very bingeable. They're 25, 26 minutes long. All episodes of We Might Regret This available now on the BBC iPlayer.
Since we've started on this show, we've become a big success. We've won awards on top of the polls. You've said that we're the best. We don't want to argue because you lot pay our wages. So we'll agree and say that we're the best show on in ages. The Chris Moyle Show, the best show on in ages.
And still to come here on BBC Radio Scotland with me, Shereen Nanjiani. Kamala Harris accepts her nomination to become the official Democratic candidate, getting election season into full swing. Plus, as Kirsty Allsop gets pelters for letting her 15-year-old son go interrailing, when did you first go on holiday by yourself? Text me on 80295. But first, I'm here with my guests, Afia Hagan, Ewan Blockley and Brian Beacom. It's time to get your moments of the week. And Brian, you're just about old enough to go on holiday yourself. But
I've been old enough for a wee while.
But you're experiencing a bit of
sense of loss,
empty nest syndrome.
Yeah, and it's a really, really strange one. I mean, just a little bit of context. A couple of years ago on this programme, I was listening to Paul and Jane Graham talking about their child going off to university, and they were almost tearful. You could almost see the tears in their eyes and the sadness in their voice, that croaky kind of feel about losing their child who's going off into the big world that is academia. And I kind of laughed at them. Well, not kind of, I did. I just mocked them, and I thought, oh, come on, grow up. That's what kids do. They go up and they go away. But now it's happening to me, because I've kind of grown up, and alongside the development of James Ross, my friend's boy, who I've known right from the very beginning and who's lived with me at one point as well. And I've moved from this relationship with him. I was sort of like the uncle that he never wanted, to becoming a friend, and we've become closer and closer over the years. And now it's got to the point he's ready to go to university next week, and this is really difficult for me. So I've become Paul McNamee in that sense, that I'm really feeling this kind of sense of loss, and I'm trying to understand it in my own head. Is it because I think he won't be able to cope in this new world? Will he not make friends quickly enough? Will he not be able to feed himself outside of going to Greg's? Will he be able to interact with this new world? I'm not sure. But then there's also the other part of it as well, which is totally selfish. I mean, who am I going to have the Thursday night film nights with? Who am I going to go to the theatre with? Because we go to the theatre about 30 times a year. And who am I going to go for a coffee with on Sunday afternoon? We used to go to my mother's for Sunday dinner. Who am I going to play James Taylor songs with in the guitar? This is just an incredible loss for me. So I feel I feel
sorry
this,
for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely sorry for myself. And and I'm sure Paul and Jen will be listening to this and thinking, ha 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 ha. Now you know what it's like. But I've got to turn it all around. I've got to think I'm not so much losing a friend as getting a railway season ticket.
Well, exactly. I mean, where is he going to?
He's
university?
going to Edinburgh. Yeah, he's going to Herrick Walk.
And you live in Glasgow.
And I live in
I mean,
Glasgow.
it's not exactly the other end of the universe.
I know, and I said to him, will you be able to get back over for our film nights on a Thursday? And he said, I don't know.
Yeah, you've got to let them go eventually. And as I say, we will be coming on to that shortly. But Ewan, you've had a wee holiday. Not an interrail holiday.
No, further away than Edinburgh. But we went to Mallorca at the start of the week, which just outside Palma, which was fantastic. It was roasting hot. I hid in the shade for the majority of the time because even with Factor 50 I somehow still managed to burn. So although obviously all of you in the studio can see that I've got pretty much absolutely no tan whatsoever, so I managed to avoid that and just drink lots of beer. It was fantastic, and I thoroughly recommend it. I think it's the architecture in particular. We went to the Palma Cathedral, which if for those who are listening who haven't been, it really, really is incredible. And just in general, the restaurants, the whole vibe of the island. Obviously, it's known for, particularly people of my age, it's known for Magaluf. That's what it's known for, and kind of lads and lassies holidays. But
it's also at the moment it's been known for protests because of over tourism as well.
Yeah, and Barcelona I think has had quite a lot of that. Luckily, we didn't experience any of that when we were there. So I mean, I highly recommend it for anyone that's considering maybe a summer holiday this year or next year, because it was just fantastic.
Okay, Afia, you're having a wee holiday right now as we speak.
Having a wee staycation, a little city break in London, in the city I live in. But we were actually supposed to do this for our anniversary a few weeks ago, but because of the riots that spread across England, I ended up covering it for work, so we couldn't go, which was actually really disappointing. So we decided to do it this weekend because it's bank holiday. So we had a really lovely dinner last night, and I'll be in the spa later. And it's perfect because it's raining in London. We've had such nice weather for like 2 weeks.
Sorry, I'm not listening. I'm not listening. La 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 la.
And today it's apoplectic outside. It's rubbish, it's raining, it's windy, so it's a perfect day to just spend in the spa with a book. I can't wait.
Yeah, I don't know why you're not in there right now, but we are very grateful to you. I'm very grateful that you are with us. Okay, let's put you to work then. Yes, with my guests, Afia Hagan, Ewan Blockley and Brian Beacom. Well, now to Chicago, where on Thursday night, Kamala Harris accepted the Democratic nomination for president on the final night of the party convention.
As president, I will be laser focused on creating opportunities for the middle class that advance their economic security, stability, and dignity. Together, we will build what I call an opportunity economy.
Well, the nomination's just a formality at this point, but her set-piece speech to close the event is a key moment for a campaign that is short on time to introduce Harris as a presidential candidate to the US public. Republican rival Donald Trump gave a running commentary on social media saying, why didn't she do something about the things of which she complains? Democrats have been riding on a surge of enthusiasm since Harris became their nominee, but polls suggest the election remains extremely tight. Also getting plenty of headlines was this barnstorming performance from Kamala's vice presidential candidate, Tim Walz.
We've got something better to offer the American people. It starts with our candidate, Kamala Harris. Leaders don't spend all day insulting people and blaming others. Leaders do the work. So I don't know about you, I'm ready to turn the page on these guys. So go ahead, say it with me. We're not going back.
And as he spoke, images of his son standing up in the crowd with tears rolling down his cheeks, shouting, "That's my dad." I mean, you have been immersing yourself in this week. There have been lots of big moments like that, and you know the stars came out: the Clintons, the Obamas, Oprah. What are your impressions of this week?
Yeah, it was. I mean, there was a lot of Democratic kind of royalty, so to speak, that were there. I think that for me, Joe Biden's speech was a pretty big one. You know, I think hats off to him. It must have been incredibly difficult to do what he did. In my view, he did it the benefit of the US, because I don't think he would have won the election, and I suspect he knew that. So to take a step back and to do that, I think he deserves the plaudits. And I think the conference, the DNC conference, where a lot of them were, one of their central themes was thanking Joe Biden, which I think was definitely much appreciated. But for me, Tim Walz was the moment. His I don't know what it is. I don't know. The man has an innate ability to make you smile, and he communicates in a way that I think few politicians can pull off. It's got an authenticity about it. Now, I know he was a school teacher. He was a coach as well for I think his American his school team, and you can tell that the way that, I mean, when I was listening to him,
sounded like the pep talk before the match.
And I was getting kind of vibed up and ready to go. So no, he's been absolutely fantastic. I think Michelle and Barack Obama as well. Barack Obama made a particular joke which I won't repeat on air, but which was very, very funny, which definitely really, really riled up Donald Trump. And just to complete this, what made the whole thing brilliant was the fact that you knew that Donald Trump was watching and you knew how angry he was getting. And that, to me, he did a rally right after it, and it was completely just off the wall. Some of probably his worst stuff. So,
but how do you think Kamala Harris came across? Because this was her speech was mainly addressed at the American audience, the people that wouldn't necessarily be voting Democrat. And some said, she was a bit low key. It was a bit playing it safe.
And I think that's deliberate, because I think she's got to play it safe. I think that the economic legacy of Joe Biden is actually a lot better than Donald Trump is trying to claim, and I think the general public are actually quite a bit aware of that. I think as well, the more that she opens herself up or pushes herself into particular areas, that then gives Donald Trump avenues, because Donald Trump does not actually care about politics. I mean, he just attacks. It's not like he's got a specific ideology, so to speak. He just does what he believes is popular that will get him there. So she doesn't want to open herself up to those criticisms, and I think she was very careful. There was focus groups that were done afterwards that I watched. There was analysis, I think it was on the BBC, and they were kind of giving it a B and a B plus. See, to be honest, I'm sure she'll take that. So, yeah, no. I mean, it wasn't a barnstormer, but Tim Walz, that's what he was there for, to rally the troops.
Your thoughts on the week?
Yeah, pretty much agreeing what you were saying there, especially about Tim Walz. I think there's the man who looks like presidential material rather than Kamala Harris. I thought she was better. I thought she was improved, but I think the big problem with Kamala Harris is that she still doesn't define herself. And Ewan was saying that was deliberate in the sense that she's holding back from offering up major policy. I don't know if she's got major policy. I don't know if she knows what she's supposed to stand for at this point in time, because that's been the level of criticism. It's always she's had to contend with right back since she was a district attorney back in California. She's seen as being quite tough. She's been quite bullying. She's been controlling. But is she offering anything out there to people? Is she offering that sense of community support? Tim Walz is certainly doing that, but Kamala Harris doesn't seem to be able to do that. What she did quite well was she dropped the gender argument that she'd used a couple of years ago, that it's time for a woman and it's time for a black person to be elevated in the way that they haven't been before. She hasn't used that, which I think is solid. So she's saying, look at me, I'm Kamala Harris, look at me for what I stand for. But I think the problem is we don't quite know yet what she does stand for. And when you compare her to the performance of her running mate, then she doesn't come across exceptionally well. However, she probably will get across the line. I think the most important event this week was not how they performed in these debates, performances. I thought the most important moment this week was the announcement that the interest rates in America are going to drop, and that suggests that the economy is doing, as Ewan said, better than before. If the Federal Reserve are prepared to put themselves behind a Kamala Harris regime, which it looks like it is doing, that could really get her over the line.
Yeah, because in one sense she's portraying herself as the newcomer, but she's also an incumbent.
She is an incumbent, and you have to look at her legacy when she was vice president. I know you don't get much chance to do that because it's a fairly limited role, but she didn't stand up to be counted. You're not quite sure what she stands for along the way there.
Fia, you also have been immersed in it this week. What are the key impressions for you that came out of this?
Well, I think, first, a real stark difference between the Republican National Convention, which I've covered, and this Democratic National Convention is that I think with the Democratic National Convention, they're trying to bring joy. That was mentioned a lot, especially on the night when we had the Obamas and when we had Oprah Winfrey as well. It's about good vibes, and you definitely get that from Coach Walls and his son, who was just absolutely gorgeous. And that whole moment, especially in the moment when he hugged his dad on stage, I thought was wonderful.
Absolutely.
And trying to counter the darkness and the chaos, as the Democratic Party have framed it, from the Trump years and taking people forward. That phrase that has been repeated throughout the convention, we're not going back. I think that's something that's really, really important. But also, we're seeing a real shift in the Democratic Party and what that looks like and what they stand for. I mean, so many American flags, they got bigger as the week went on. So by the time we had Kamala Harris in that headline spotlight, the flags were absolutely massive. 100,000 balloons were dropped to the end, red, white, and blue balloons, the chants of USA, USA. And I think you would traditionally align that with the Republican Party. The Republican Party seemed to own patriotism, that patriotism and Americanism belonged to them. And I think by the Democratic Party trying to take that back and saying, patriotism can belong to all of us. If you're a patriot and you love America, Democrats love America too. We can do that too. Here is our brand of patriotism. That, along with Coach Walls, will get the middle. And if you can get the middle of America, people who feel they have been forgotten by what they see as the extreme left or the extreme right, then that's what's going to get you over the line. Along with young people, you had a whole swathe of people called Creators for Kamala, right? Who were there, who were given, some of them prioritized over media and journalists to get the message out to their followers, to their supporters. Look at the amount of musicians and, actors and things that they had on stage. Like Kerry Washington, when they did the roll call, they had Little John, all these incredible artists with, if you look at the Democratic National Convention roll call compared to the RNC roll call, I mean, my goodness. But harnessing all these fan bases is very, very important.
Okay, I mean, there is one thing that I would ask, though, is have they learned the lessons of the past? Because I remember Hillary's campaign when she lost to Trump, they had all the great and the good of Hollywood on their side, and somehow that played into that narrative of the Hollywood elite, and it didn't seem to go down as well with the middle classes, as they call them in America, who feel ignored.
But I think that's where Coach Walls comes in, and actually where Trump comes in himself, because in 2016, we had an idea of what potentially Donald Trump could do in a presidency, what it could look like. Now we know, or American voters know, what a Trump presidency looks like. They know now. They've seen. So now the Democratic Party have the advantage of, okay, look what happened before. These are all the things we can pick out. We are not going back. And, now you have someone who can harness the middle, someone who is from the American middle class, who hasn't amassed a huge amount of wealth, who was a veteran, who was a teacher, who was a coach, who had fertility issues. I mean, my goodness, he ticks every single box. And that is what you want.
What you've also done, she does reach out to the right a little bit as well, because she's very hawkish sounding. She did make this big statement. She said, I want to ensure America has the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. You never get Hillary Clinton coming out with comments like that. So she's reaching out to the right there as well to take into that Donald Trump area.
Well, the hard work of campaigning starts now. They haven't got long, and obviously the next big set piece will be that debate next month between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And still to come, will the so-called latte levy change the way you get your daily coffee? And we review a fascinating new drama promising an inside look at, it's a documentary actually, an inside look at Saudi's Crown Prince. But first, how young is too young to go on holiday by yourself? Well, the TV presenter Kirsty Allsop has been in the news this week after getting some flack for letting her 15-year-old son go interrailing with his 16-year-old pal. Well, Kirsty defended her decision, saying that her son is very sensible and that she was more fearful of the risks of him getting into a car driven by a newly qualified driver or going to a music festival where drugs would be in circulation than going abroad by himself. So what is the right age? Well, Kay Adams was discussing this on BBC Radio Scotland on Wednesday morning, but not everyone was convinced.
So is that legal?
Yeah, why not?
I don't know, is it?
Young, I went when I was 15.
Did you?
Yeah, my mum and dad bought me a one-way ticket. Chrissy from near Kyle of Lacau says, travelling freedom was when I was 16. I used to go through to Glasgow every week from the Angus Glens to stay with my boyfriend at the halls of Jordan Hill College. I'd go through on the buses as a child's fare, and then I'd go to the pub for a pint in Glasgow. I was more mature then than I am in my 40s. We'd go and get the last-minute no-show tickets for the theatre and would survive on a poke of chips.
Wow. Well, I'm going to go to Ewan first as the youngest of us. What age were you when you first had your first holiday? Let's call it a holiday without your parents.
Yeah, 18.
18?
18 was the first kind of lads' holiday, and that was kind of after school. We all could drink legally, so that was great. And we could go abroad and have quite a bit of fun. So yeah, but that was the kind of first. I can't imagine me at 15. See, when I was 15, I would be on this. If I was on this programme, I'd be like, oh no, I'm mature enough. Yeah, you know, we need to be trusted. All these sorts of things. But looking back on it, absolutely no chance. Like me at 15.
But does it depend on well, it depends on the teenager, but also the type of holiday. If you're going with the lads to, you know, I don't know, Magaluf or whatever, you know, to party.
Yeah.
Versus interrailing when, you know, you've got to have your wits about you, travelling about and getting on the right train and timetables and all the rest of it. Slightly different kind of holiday.
Yeah, but there's bad people everywhere. And I think it's
it's the bad people that you're worried about.
Yeah. I mean, I think for me at 15, it definitely that would have been the case. You know, your brain isn't fully formed. You're more easily able to be taken advantage of. There's lots of things that, you know, as a kid you don't want to accept. And when I was 15, I did not want to accept it, but because I saw myself as an adult at 15. But when you look back on it, you're like, no, absolutely not. Like I'm glad that my parents were like, no chance, you can wait till you're 18 before you're doing any of that.
Okay, what about you, Afia?
So I first went on like a holiday with my friends when I was 18, absolutely. Not younger than that. Did festivals actually when I was younger. I think my first festival I went to was Tea in the Park, showing my age, when I was 14. And so 15 interrailing, for me, that's too young. I think you're absolutely right in saying, like, me at 15 was a mess. I would not. I just wouldn't have been able to do that. And when I think of my daughter, she's not quite 15. I mean, she's 12, but I can't imagine her when she's 15. But I wouldn't feel comfortable about her like interrailing by herself for 3 weeks at 15. Absolutely not. I think you do have a point in saying it depends on what type of holiday, and also what are they like? Are they responsible? Are they not? And yes, you know, there's been bad people from the dawn of time. Yeah, we probably just know much more about it. But for me personally, I think interrailing around Europe at 15 is just too young. I wouldn't be able to, and I wouldn't sleep for 3 weeks. Like, do you know what I mean? Just no, too stressful.
Well, in our day, Brian, I mean, I think my first holiday abroad without my parents, I was probably about 18 or 19. But it was also more daunting then because there weren't smartphones and the internet. You were much more disconnected. You could disappear off the radar. I had assumed that it would be easier, you know, or parents might be a little more relaxed about letting them go off at 15, maybe not 15, but 16 if they felt they were mature enough.
Well, that's an interesting point you make there. You say that it was more daunting then. I don't know if it was more daunting. perhaps it was in a technical sense, but we didn't realise that it was daunting
No,
when
that's
you're
true.
younger.
That's
you
true.
just got up and you took off, and I would have been up and gone.
It would certainly be more worrying for your parents,
Well,
because you couldn't necessarily phone home, or
I don't.
you're just waiting for a postcard.
I don't think that. Actually, I don't think that was the case. I think whenever I said to my
You
mother,
never thought about your mother, did you?
No,
You
no,
were
I
just
don't
off
think she
enjoying
thought about
yourself.
me. He's away. Away you go. That's what you do. You just go up and you take off. You pack your bag. You get a rucksack and your sleeping bag, and you're gone. And the only thing I think that prevented me from getting up and going any earlier than I did was probably money. It's just never had the bus fare to Paisley at the time. So as soon as I got money, as soon as I realised you could get an Interrail card, I was off. But I remember one of the first Interrail journeys I did. I took off to Greece with a few friends. My jacket got stolen in the toilet in Athens. My passport was gone. I had no tickets.
Oh, no.
And I had to somehow get to Crete with almost no money, where I met up with friends. But on the journey, the point of this whole story is I met a lovely Irish girl on the train going down through Yugoslavia, as it was at the time, and we became very close. I had a great few weeks in Crete, and then took off to a kibbutz in Israel, where I spent 3 months, and I'm having a fantastic time. All of that came from misadventure and chaos, but you've got to take the chances. I think the big question is, why don't parents allow for that kind of freedom now? The world, as Afia rightly says, it's no more dangerous. There's no more paedophiles and murderers and rapists around now. But why have parents now changed so that they want to cotton wool their kids and they feel so protective of them? And I've even been quoting my friend James is going off to university. I'm concerned about that. Why am I concerned? Why are we all so worried now in a way that we weren't before?
Yeah, and it's interesting that Kirsty Allsop was remarking, Afia, that a lot of parents had been saying, yeah, okay, maybe for my son, but I wouldn't let my daughter go, which isn't fair. But mainly because they were more worried for their daughter.
And the thing is, traditionally, and I'm sure there's going to be a reaction to this, girls are way more responsible than boys. And
80295.
That's true.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. I'm way more responsible than my brother. When I was growing up, my dad used to tell me, that you're the eldest, even though my brother's 2.5 years older than me. My dad used to say, that you're the eldest, so you have to do this and that. That you're eldest, have a word with your brother. Girls are way more responsible than boys, but I guess, there's the perception of there would be more danger towards women than there would be towards men. But girls are way more responsible than boys.
Okay, well, listen to this, just to finish in this item. Chris has texted us on 80295 to say, at 10 years old, my parents dropped me off at Watford Junction, telling me, don't forget to change at Birmingham, then Crewe, and make sure you get off when the train gets to North Wales, get a bus to Lake Bala, and then make your way up to the youth hostel. Enjoy your sailing and bird-watching holiday with the RSPB. That was the 1960s. Clearly
that'd be neglect now. Those parents would be getting charged.
Well, he's lived to tell the tale.
Yeah.
Now, if you had to pay an extra 25p for getting a single-use takeaway cup for your coffee, what would you do? Bring your own mug, stump up the extra cash, or would it just put you off buying one altogether? Well, these are the questions facing Scottish Government ministers who've launched a consultation on whether businesses should be required to add an additional charge on top of any existing costs in a bid to reduce the use of disposable cups going to landfill. Well, the scheme would be similar to the current charges in place for single-use carrier bags, and consumers would be encouraged. Facing Scottish Government ministers who've launched a consultation on whether businesses should be required to add an additional charge on top of any existing costs in a bid to reduce the use of disposable cups going to landfill. Well, the scheme would be similar to the current charges in place for single-use carrier bags, and consumers would be encouraged to use reusable cups. Gillian Martin is Acting Cabinet Secretary for Net Zero and Energy.
If you look at people on the street today, they are very used to having this kind of reusable cups, whether it's to hold water with them, whether it's to have their own coffee as they leave the home every day to travel to work. So I actually don't think that this would be really a massive burden on anyone. I think we would get used to it. A lot of places do this already. A lot of workplaces have this.
Okay, but the Scottish Retail Consortium has said that retailers are already taking action to improve the recycling of cups and reduce the use of disposable cups. We question, at a time where the economy is flatlining and high streets are struggling, whether this is the time to introduce a new cost to hard-pressed consumers. Well, Gillian Martin said it's actually not going to amount to much. How do you feel about this? And tell me about your coffee, your takeaway use, Ewan.
I can be quite. I mean, I'm not really a coffee drinker, actually, to be perfectly honest with you. So I might not be the best person to ask on that specific. But what
apparently 71 cups per person in 2021-22. That's the throwaway.
That's wild.
Yeah,
that is wild. I mean, pretty much everyone around me in the office drinks coffee. I'm like one of the few people, and they always ask me if I want a coffee, despite having told them I don't drink for ages, because it's just everyone else drinks coffee. But no, I mean, I think in terms of the retailers, I think the Retail Consortium is absolutely right on this. You know, they are really, really struggling. And I think if you go on any high street, you know, Falkirk, Dundee, Aberdeen, you go on Union Street in Aberdeen, you go on Argyle Street here, Princess Street in Edinburgh, you know, you're seeing so many closed and vacant shops. And actually quite a lot of the new places, particularly where I am in the south side of Glasgow, a lot of them are coffee shops. And what we don't want is the few businesses that seem to be actually be doing quite well to actually say, oh, here's another kind of extra 25p you're going to have to put on every single, you know, drinkable product that you're selling that comes in a cup. And I just think, you know, big companies would probably be able to swallow this and say, no, that's fine, we'll keep prices the same. But it's also it's for the companies, for the small, medium-sized businesses that will struggle, but it's also as well the consumers, because, you know, they are going to continue to drink coffee, but now they're going to have, you know, you think about how many cups that is, how many cups a week, that kind of money adds up. And in a cost of living crisis, I just don't think it's the right move. I get the point, like I get why they're doing it, I understand it. But in my view, there are better, probably more cost-efficient ways for us to drive recycling.
I mean, the plastic bag thing seems to have worked, Brian. Most of us have got into the habit of taking our own carrier bag to the supermarket. You know, would you be averse to carrying your own, you know, reusable cup to a coffee shop?
Yeah, I think it's very different. I when I go to the supermarket now, I carry a tote bag or a little plastic bag or something that easily fits in my pocket, so you don't need to know. I think in a practical sense, I don't think people would be carrying a portable or a real cup around to go into coffee shops. I think I love the principle of this. I think that's absolutely right. I think the figure shows that 388 million cups were used in Scotland for a 12-month period to March 2022. It was clearly a big problem. We've got to do something about it.
Because I should say that, you know, while some are compostable, but most of them are paper with plastic in the inside, so it's a more complicated and probably more expensive process to recycle them.
The answer has to be in technology. We need the kind of technology so that there's cups are completely disposable. So we're not at that stage yet. So, and I think the big problem we've got as well is the government are suggesting that the money raised, some of it will go back to the retailers, but then it looks like it's a tax by another form, and they take the money and they use it for improvement.
There are various options. Businesses could keep it, they could spend it on environmental protection measures, they could donate it to a charity, they could treat it as a tax. These are all things that are up for consultation at the moment. Afia, I know that you're not a coffee drinker, but do you think this is a fair way to deal with the amount of waste?
No, I don't think so. I think, like you so rightly said, this puts sort of smaller coffee shops especially under pressure by increasing their prices, and puts consumers under pressure because coffees are, from what I know, super expensive anyway, like £7-8, I don't know. And I suppose, you know, added costs on that will make people not want to buy them, not want to shop in those places. I do agree that we need to do better on recycling, especially these kinds of things. You talked about them being paper on the outside, plastic on the outside, and the inside, and therefore they're harder to recycle. Why don't we just make them easier to recycle? You know, you get those paper straws that will last for about 10 seconds, but can we not make cups like that, or is the coffee just going to seep out and you'd have third-degree burns? Maybe that's not a good idea. But we need to make cups better, easier to recycle. That's really the point. And I don't think putting a levy on that for customers in cafes is a good idea.
Okay, well, someone calling themselves Angry Fiona has texted 802295 to say no one needs those stupid takeaway coffees. No one. And they certainly don't need to dispose of them in my paper bin. They are not recyclable.
It's 9 o'clock and the Summer Olympics are underway. At Jim's place, they're into boxing. At the Lions, basketball. Peg and Dave's, gymnastics. But how are they watching 3 different events at the same time? Introducing the Olympics Triplecast. 3 exclusive cable channels, each televising different events simultaneously. Live with no interruptions. Switch back and forth between events as you please. But to get Triplecast, you have to order the Triplecast. Call 1-800-OLYMPIC. You'll save money, too, because a full day of uninterrupted viewing is regularly $29.95. But if you call now, you'll enjoy 15 days for less than $9 a day. That's a 70% savings. So instead of watching just part of the Olympics, you can choose to see it all, live on 3 cable channels. The choice is yours. The choice is Triplecast. Call 1-800-OLYMPIC now.
And coming up after us on BBC Radio Scotland at 11:30, Des Clark is here with Breaking the News, and his guests include Jim Smith and Karen Bartka. At 12 and Off the Ball, Stuart and Tam's guests are singer Jai McDowell and author Sophie Gravia. That's followed at 2 by Sports Sound with all the action from across Scottish football with open all mics on FM and BBC Sounds, and Rangers versus Ross County on digital radio. You can also ask your smart speaker to play BBC Radio Scotland Extra. At 7 o'clock tonight, it's Take the Floor, and Gary Innes has Ian Cruikshanks and his Scottish dance band in session. He's also joined by fiddle player Roddy Matthews. And looking ahead to Sunday morning, Connie McLaughlin discusses the work of one Scottish Christian charity in the field of drug rehabilitation. And her Faith Forum panel look at why more older women are getting involved in acts of protest. That's tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock. What's getting... With my guests, Sophia Hagen, Ewan Blockley and Brian Beacom. Now, from junior prince to Saudi Arabia's de facto ruler, the rise of Mohammed bin Salman has been meteoric. In a new BBC documentary this week, friends, advisors and Western spies tell of ambition, controversy and ruthlessness.
He manipulated and plotted first to secure his father's succession as king, and next to secure his own succession to his father.
MBS is unimaginably powerful. Saudi Arabia is an absolute monarchy, and he can do whatever he wants.
The religious police were everywhere. And then, all of a sudden, everything changed.
He has thrown open a closed society. But at the same time, MBS has left behind a trail of repression. Accused of suppressing free speech and authorizing murder.
The situation in Saudi Arabia is the worst ever in 30 years.
Mohammed bin Salman matters because Saudi Arabia matters. He can single-handedly affect the global oil price, and that affects everybody. He'll be king for 40 years. He's the guy.
Yeah, that was a story of the rise of Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS. That was Morven Christie actually doing the voiceover there. Much of this you didn't know, Afia?
I knew nothing about MBS, to be honest. I knew about what happened to Jamal Khashoggi, and obviously I knew sort of the kind of more obvious things that he'd apparently changed Saudi Arabia. When we're allowed to drive, it seemed like it was perhaps more progressive than it had been in the past. But I didn't know anything about his background, where he was in the line of succession. I was really, really gripped by this, and I'll be honest, I wasn't expecting to be. finding out about how the line of succession has about 45 men in it ahead of him, and the things that he was prepared to do to harness power at such a young age were incredible to me. Sort of like the inference that he perhaps wanted to kill one of his uncles or his father, using this ring that had poison in it. The way that he was feeding lines to his father when his health started to be in decline, and the fact that he had his eye on the prize, and the prize being the crown prince, and being in charge from such a young age, and the things that he's done to get there. And also, I thought what was incredible was the access that he had to some of the interviewees. These were people that knew him. An old university pal who was there on his graduation day was talking about him, people that used to work for him, with him, some of whom are now in exile. I mean, incredibly brave of them to talk about MBS and the family on camera in this way, but some incredible work done by the production team to get them in the first place.
Yeah.
So this was absolutely gripping. Definitely the best thing I watched this week.
The first episode was called Game of Thrones, and I don't think it was misnamed, Brian. Because the lengths he went to get to power, because at the beginning you see him in this photograph right at the edge of the picture of all the royals. He's nowhere, he's no one, but somehow he's managed to sort of pick everybody off.
He manages to manipulate his way right into the centre of the picture, and as Afia is suggesting there as well, he uses threat, intimidation, violence, and there's accusations of murder as well. What I thought that was fantastic about this programme was just really how it revealed the duality of this man. I mean, on the one hand, you can see he's a visionary. He's a class act. He's a really, really clever, intelligent person who knows how to change the very face of Saudi Arabia. He introduced talks with Israel for the first time. He introduced women's freedoms, as he is suggesting there. He introduced massive cultural shifts. He brings pictures of Christ into a Muslim country and sets up museums. But
it was still repressive and ruthless.
He's really taken the country forward. But then he's also a psychopath who orders, the hits and the threats and accusations of murder.
Ewan?
I mean, I don't know how I'll follow up with that, because I completely agree. And I'm somewhat of a kind of student of history and politics, and I've got a friend of mine who's from Saudi Arabia. So I've always kind of asked him all these questions about the region and stuff, because I'm fascinated about it, particularly when the Yemenis war and all this kind of stuff that's currently ongoing. But I thought the programme was brilliant at visualising just how big the Saudi Arabian royal family is, just how weird the line of succession is, and how it works and passes from brother to brother rather than father and son.
Okay.
But I thought it was fantastic, and I highly recommend to everyone at home to give it a watch.
Well, episode 2 is on Monday night, but both episodes of The Kingdom, the world's most powerful prince, are available now on the BBC iPlayer. Now, bland is banned, as apparently the trend for beige and magnolia or neutral has bitten the dust, with more homeowners than ever opting for pops of colour in their decor. Someone should tell Lawrence Llewellyn Bowen.
Is that too orange for you?
It's a little bit orange, but I'm going to embrace the orange.
It does make me realise that you can be much bolder.
And Afia, you definitely embrace the orange.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all about the orange, the pink, the gold, the African prints everywhere. I just don't believe in beige as a colour, as a concept, as a lifestyle. It's just not for me.
As
My
a
house
lifestyle.
it's just not me. My house is a riot, an absolute riot of colour. Like I said, my living room is like pink, orange, gold, African prints. My kitchen is like grey and green. My daughter's bedroom is a bit calmer, but yeah. And in my room, we've got like gold and black, and then we've got a giant print of Jay-Z and one of Kylie, and yeah, it's mad. Love it.
Yeah, it's very you, I think. Thank you for that. We're going to have to leave it there for now. We're back at 11 when we'll be talking about the right to switch off from work, review an epic drama that may have slipped under your radar, and as Delia Smith says, today's kids are missing out on the joys of a good pork chop. I'll tell you my favourite dinner, you tell me yours. lots of work-related texts and emails when you're supposed to be off duty? And will the government's proposed new law, the right to switch off, improve your work-life balance and even boost the nation's productivity? The sun is out in Glasgow for 5 minutes and it might hit 18 degrees in Aberdeen later, but if you're thinking taps off, I'll tell you why you might want to reconsider. And Delia Smith says Gen Z are missing out on the joys of a good pork chop because there are so many fancier alternatives available these days. I used to love a good pork chop when I was wee, always with baked beans and white bread and butter. It had to be pan loaf. So this morning I want to know, what was your perfect childhood dinner and have you tried serving it to your own kids? Anne from Irvine says, my favourite, always steak mince with mashed potatoes, plenty butter and cabbage with butter and black pepper. Oh, cabbage with butter. I love that. I'm getting hungry now. Yeah. What is yours? Do your kids or your grandkids like it too? You can text me on 80295. That's charged at your standard message rate, or use the hashtag Shereen on social media. But now we're going to talk about a bit of a sleeper hit for you today. Perhaps you started watching this next drama back in 2022 when the first series hit Apple TV. But if, like all of us in the studio today, you missed it, time to play catch up as the second series of Pachinko is just beginning. It's received real critical acclaim for its cinematography, writing and performances. Based on a best-selling novel by Min Ji Lee, it follows four generations of a Korean family as they leave their homeland in an indomitable quest to survive and thrive. It's mostly in Korean and Japanese with a bit of English, so we can't give you too much of a flavour of the action on the radio, but here goes.
And people like us, we don't need to walk in our family's shadows.
Well, like I say, you can't give too much of a flavour of it on radio, but of all of us, you were the one that was most familiar with this because your girlfriend has read the book and loved it.
But she hadn't seen the series. And what we've now got into the situation that I'm sure most people that are in relationships will be able to attest to this is that I watched the first episode. I said, "Oh, this exists," and she was like, "Oh my goodness, right? Okay, well, let me watch it and then we can catch up." And of course, she's still not done it yet, and I'm sitting here tapping my foot, waiting to get on with this because it was absolutely fantastic. I think this time period, particularly.
Well, explain a wee bit more about because there's two. Well, there's more than one. There's multiple time zones in it.
So in the first episode, there is.
We've gone back to series one, I should.
Yeah. So in the series one, in the first episode, they show a child and a father from, I think it was, the very, very early it was like 1915, that was it. So it was when Japan had essentially just colonised Korea around about that time, and they were treating the people obviously incredibly harshly as the Japanese did. Mm-hmm. And then also it's 4 generations hence, it then kind of cuts to a son who's then coming back to Japan, I believe, to then kind of speak to his relatives, and there's kind of little touches of like the history of the family and picture frames and everything else. The thing that I loved about it, the music was absolutely fantastic. I have to say the soundtrack to it was brilliant, but the cinematography of the entire thing, and this seems to be a thing with this particular streaming platform where they're doing a lot of book adaptations, where they've done Slow Horses, they've done Silo.
Back next month.
Been the two.
Yeah.
What Slow Horses back next month?
Yeah.
All right, I didn't know that. Fantastic. There we go. Some more good news. But it's just they've all been fantastic, and I have to say, for anyone that hasn't, please do watch it. And I hope my girlfriend is listening to this. Get the first episode watched so that we can crack on with the rest of the series.
Yeah, I mean, it does jump about in time, and there's a bit of English, there's a bit of Korean, there's a bit of Japanese. Did you find that it hard to concentrate and keep up Brian?
No, not at all. Not about that. And because I watch subtitles all the time anyway, so it doesn't matter a jot to me. What really worked for me in this series was when we go back to 1915. It tells the story through the eyes of a little girl called Sunja. And for some reason, she's got this incredible wisdom. She can relate to adults. She can put adults in their place in a really clever way. She's a fantastic character.
And I think that it follows her through the generations.
Next thing you know, that she's a grandmother, and we're looking at her grandson who's facing a real difficult time in his life because he's trying to develop a business that involves going to Japan, and she then becomes this kind of oracle. She's got this thought of him, how she can advise him and keep him right. So you've got these two stories going along simultaneously. It's so cleverly interwoven, and there's a lovely little, I can't really describe it too well, but there's a spiritual content to it as well, to how she came about, how she got this wisdom, and can it impart upon this grandson whose career in life is so delicately balanced at this moment in time.
Yeah.
Clever.
The other thing I like about it is the fact that it tells the story of a time and place that I know very little about. You know, it goes from colonial Korea to the Second World War, Allied occupation of Japan later, the Korean War, you know, the Japan's growth spate later in the late 80s and 90s. So it really does span generations. Maybe that's a reason that you were finding it more difficult to follow, Afia, because it was sort of jumping back and forward.
Yeah, it jumps all over the place. And I don't usually mind that, but I just think this just didn't grab me. I agree with you, and the production values are clearly very high. The cinematography was beautiful. It was beautifully shot. The costuming, everything was absolutely on point, but it just didn't really grab me. But Apple TV is like this kind of warren of, you have to really dig through. They've got some really, really incredible stuff on there. And I think, there's people that will love this. I'm just not one of them. But, Apple TV are really, really doing the most with having these really incredible series.
Yeah. Ewan, it is, you do have to concentrate. Did you watch it with the subtitles? Because I rarely do this, but I was just a bit tired. I thought I can't be bothered reading, so I put the dubbed version on.
Oh, no.
But actually, the dubbed version still has subtitles as well.
Yeah, because I watched it dubbed and I was confused.
But what's quite good is the Japanese subtitles are in blue and the Korean subtitles in yellow, so that you can tell who's, because that's quite important to know which language that they're speaking in. Do you think people that can't go subtitles might get put off with this? Would you urge them to get over it?
And you know, at the very start I thought, subtitles. I mean, but it gripped me. I think the story gripped me so much that I just didn't care.
Okay.
I was able to fully consume. In terms of dubbed, I have tried in the past other things, and I don't know, I think it's more the fact that the noise that's coming out of their mouth is not the same, and I can't match it
isn't
up.
the same. I've gone back to the original with the subtitles. Obviously, my Korean and Japanese isn't that good. Okay, well, I think for three of us, Pachinko is definitely worth continuing with. Season 1, all of it is available on Apple TV, and the first episode of season 2 is out now. And still to come, would you benefit from the right to switch off from work? And it might hit 17 degrees in Aberdeen today, maybe even 18. Is that taps off? Or do you agree with a third of people who apparently want it banned? But now to Delia Smith, who has said that she feels sorry that a lot of young people don't know what a good pork chop is like. Well, in an interview with The Times, she admits that she's a bit behind the curve with today's cuisine, but laments that fancier options are stealing the hearts of younger cooks. And we all remember how much Delia loved to extol the virtues of a decent cut of meat.
One thing I'm very proud of living in the British Isles is what good meat we have. In fact, I think we have the best meat in the world. There's so much hill country. You've got the Highlands of Scotland, the Welsh Mountains, the lovely rolling hills of Devon and the Pennines. And you can't grow vegetables on hills, so we're very lucky that we have such wonderful meat, best in the world. And one thing I'd like to tell you about cooking meat is all you need to know is if you think of an animal, think of me, this half, that half. This half up here drags the other half along. So this does all the hard work. And this is the meat that's tougher and needs longer cooking, whereas the back part of the meat that doesn't have to do all the work is the most tender.
Right, Ewan, you don't get that kind of video on TikTok, do you? You young Gen Zers.
An interesting analogy there. That's we used for cooking meat. I'm just so confused. I mean, moving away from that, I can't. I love a good pork chop, and in terms of kind of that kind of traditional, I mean, so my gran used to make me mince and tatties. That was it. That was my kind of staple meal. So
yeah, mince and tatties is a popular one.
Yeah, with peas actually often as well. Peas would often be thrown in there. Not mushy peas. That would be
that's
horrendous.
For chips. That's for fish and chips.
Yeah, absolutely. So no, I think this kind of comfort food. I don't know. I mean, if other members of, I mean, I can't speak for my entire generation. Maybe they are. Maybe, but I think it's kind of.
Sorry, that's what you're here for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got it on the name badge. But I think. I don't know, because it's comfort food, isn't it? Like for me, anyway.
So you're not all about because she's saying that the fancier options is what the young ones go for. Because there's more available, more varieties, more ingredients available now.
Well, we were talking earlier about being a beige lifestyles. I think that's pretty much me. So I don't think I'm maybe a good example of like the kind of expensive foods or whatever
like beige
else.
Food, do
yes,
you?
I do. Yeah, potato smileys and beans. So there we go.
What about you, Afia? You're not beige in your decor. Are you beige in your food, and do you like a good pork chop?
Oh no, I do not enjoy a good pork chop. No, it's not me at all. But I'm very not beige in my food. My favourite childhood meal, which I still love now, is my mum's jollof rice, which is honestly the best jollof rice in the whole world. And I've tried to recreate it, but it's just never as good as your mum's, is it?
No.
Ever. So that is my ultimate comfort food. But I totally agree with, like, I sometimes when my daughter wants to cook, I'm like, okay, yeah, go ahead. And she's like, right, so we need, this spice and this, and she's talking about scallops, and I was like, I didn't have a scallop till I was like 30. What do you mean? Do you know what I mean? She's like trying to cook all these things, and it's all so complicated, and I'm like, yeah, what smileys and beans, my girl, that's what you should be cooking. But yeah, definitely she's got a much more a refined and advanced and mature palate than I did at 12.
Yeah, because we didn't have exposure certainly growing up in Scotland to a lot of the ingredients that they're exposed to now.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we go out for lunch, she's like, "Oh, Mum, let's get sushi," and I'm like, "Oh my God, you're 12."
It's also very expensive, Brian.
Well, my comfort food was my mother's steak pie, and I thought that was just incredible, and I think I don't think it's unbeatable. But I think Delia's got a real problem here, because I don't think young people especially, will look back and with any kind of delight on the idea of a pork chop. For me, a pork chop was always a bit slender, a bit slight anyway. It never really filled you up and didn't really do the job. But I think so many young people there as well are becoming vegan or vegetarian at least. And certainly, I mean, I don't really eat much meat. I just eat chicken most of the time, or fish. So moving away from that. So the idea of young people being attracted to the pork chop, I don't know what would pull them in that direction at all. I can't possibly think.
And you wouldn't want to?
I don't think you would want to. You've got to think about the environment as well. It's just it's all part of that process, isn't it? As well.
How do you have
meat?
Oh yeah. How do you have a pork chop? You said you like a pork chop. How do you make it?
I've never cooked one myself, so there we go. I love a pork chop. Never had one. Never cooked one myself.
So you'll eat one and you're prepared to destroy the planet, but you don't know how
to exactly. If someone else puts it in front of me, it's good manners. Yeah. It's good manners, Brian. You've got to eat it.
Just stick it. Just stick it under the grill and let it sizzle. The fat's got to sizzle. I have been asking for food that brings back memories of your own youth. Tam says pan aggerty.
What?
Yeah, that's what I thought. He says, think Geordie stovies. Well, producer Matt has found a recipe online for this. It's corned beef or other meat, onion, beef stock, and a lid of potatoes.
Yeah, I can imagine that would taste great.
Yeah, well, keep yours coming.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the food you loved that Gen Z might be missing out on. Let's convert you into the cause. You can text me on 80295.
In the morning.
And Amanda Holden.
day long. Praise him in the noonday. Praise him all day long, whether you're weak or strong.
Now, I know you say I'm a Star Wars fan, which is true, but it's not my all-time favourite film.
Okay.
This is.
Oh, I do love this film too. The Godfather.
And this has caught my eye. Check this out. Marlon Brando's tuxedo from The Godfather, the one he wore as Vito Corleone,
Yes.
is coming up for sale.
Wow. Is it quite large
He was pretty big.
at that time?
So, what are you saying? It's going to be a bit snug on me, is that what you're saying? I want you to have a guess at how much you think that might sell for.
I mean, for a fan, that is priceless.
Isn't it?
And it's worn by Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando
Quarter of
himself.
$1 million.
The tuxedo. You got a bit high there, I'm not going to lie.
Okay, 100.
The whole day. Hot breakfast. This is hot.
You know I want you.
And coming up after us on BBC Radio Scotland at 11:30, it's Breaking the News, and Des Clark's guests this week include Jim Smith and Karen Bartka. At 12, it's Off the Ball, and Stuart and Tam's guests are singer Jai McDowell and author Sophie Gravia. At 2 o'clock in Sports Sound, they'll have all the action from across Scottish football with open all mics on FM and BBC Sounds, and Rangers versus Ross County on digital radio. You can also ask your smart speaker to play BBC Radio Scotland Extra. Gary Innes is here at 7 with Take the Floor, and he's got Ian Cruikshanks and his Scottish dance band in session, and he's also joined by fiddle player Roddy Matthews. And looking ahead to Sunday morning, Connie McLaughlin will be discussing the work of one Scottish Christian charity in the field of drug rehabilitation. And her Faith Forum panel will be looking at why more older women are getting involved in acts of protest. That's tomorrow morning from 8 o'clock. And there's much more to enjoy on BBC Sounds. It's also the best place to listen to us live every Saturday morning. Just ask your smart speaker to play BBC Radio Scotland. With my guests, Afia Hagan, Ewan Blockley and Brian Beacom. Now, I wonder if bosses across Australia are furiously texting and emailing their employees this weekend, because come Monday morning, it's time up for out-of-hours contact.
From the 26th of August 2024, most employees in the Fair Work system have a new workplace right to disconnect from work. This means employees may refuse to monitor, read, or respond to contact or attempted contact outside their working hours.
Well, that's the situation down under. Closer to home, Downing Street has said that the right to switch off when outside work is key to productivity and could actually boost the UK's economic growth. The Labour government says that introducing a right to switch off is partly to ensure that people's homes do not become 24/7 offices. A spokesperson for the Prime Minister said this is about ensuring people have some time to rest. Good employers understand that for workers to stay motivated and productive, they do need to be able to switch off, and a culture of presenteeism can be damaging to productivity. Well, the Deputy PM, Angela Rayner, spoke about this back in 2021.
Look at what's happened during the pandemic. Many people who were told before they couldn't work from home or they couldn't possibly work flexibly have been incredibly flexible over this period. And, I know a lot of employers are very appreciative of the staff that have done that. But what we want to do is make sure that there's real work-life balance. So people have the right to switch off, and also people have the right to request flexible working, and that should be granted unless there's exceptional circumstances to why that shouldn't be able to.
Well, you were nodding vigorously to a lot of that, Ewan. This is the weekend. You're not working.
Technically.
Will you get work emails?
Yeah, well, yeah. There's no question about. And look, to be fair, there is a Scottish Tory leadership contest going on, so there is a lot going on.
Sure.
And there's been a general election before then, and then it feels like everything kind of lots of stuff at work has happened. But the honest truth is that you do need that time. Because if you don't have that time to switch off and reset, and having a holiday at the start of this week was very, very good, but they're few and far between throughout the year. And if you're constantly being contacted on the weekends and the evenings, then
have you ever had a job, because you haven't been working as long as the rest of it, have you ever had a job where you could switch off out of hours and not get work emails?
No. But I have always been, with the employers and the people I've worked with, I've always been very clear that what hours I work, and I've been, but it's not like they could very well still do it, and I've just been very, very lucky with the members of the Scottish Parliament and MPs that I've worked with that they've respected that. But that is not always a guarantee in this job, I can tell you. I know a lot of my colleagues, that is definitely not a guarantee.
So to enshrine this in law, I think how it might work, Brian, would be if there was, for example, an unfair dismissal claim, the employer could be held more liable if they'd put more stress on the employee by constantly
that's the case,
bombarding them. And
I think the problem with that is that assessment is that's at the end of the relationship. That means it's gone too far in one particular
It might
direction.
be a deterrent for employers.
It might be a deterrent to a certain degree, but I think if an employee wants to overload a person with work or expectation, then I think that's probably still going to happen. But I think we've got to take in the balance overall. We've all embraced the technology that we think is wonderful. We could go on holiday and still send in emails. We can still work from wherever we choose. All that's fantastic, but then the price to pay is then that you can be contacted at any given time as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting what Ewan saying, that talking about this expectation from employers. I think it's become so intense that there really needs to be some kind of kickback against it, so that we understand there are parameters. We can't just go that far all the time.
I agree. Yeah.
It must be an issue for you as well, Afia, as somebody who, a freelancer who works for multiple employers and sometimes in different time zones as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it can be an issue, most certainly. I mean, especially with the time difference one, like you mentioned, it means I can be doing lots of things at odd hours. And I think there does need to be some legislation so people can properly switch off, so people can properly reboot, rest and come back stronger, because burnout is a real thing. And I've, had that many times actually. But it's also to take that feeling of guilt away from having a break.
Yeah.
We kind of seem to work ourselves to the point where we have to deserve rest, but everybody should just be able to rest without having to work yourself to the bone to deserve it. And so I think by having some sort of legislation in there that says everybody has a right to switch off, it'll be much, much better for people. And I'm talking to myself when I say that as well. I think this kind of thing is really, really important.
Yeah. How good at you, Ewan, ignoring or just sort of thinking, right, I'll reply to this on Monday morning when I'm back at work?
Well, so when we were on holiday, I made a promise that I kept not to get. I think the problem with politics and stuff as well is it's Twitter, it's Facebook, it's everything is all, and all my feeds are covered in political news. So even if I don't want to, if a friend of mine sends me a Twitter meme and I go into my messages and all of a sudden I see a news story and I think I can't look at that, and it's like, so because as Brian rightly said, it's like it's completely surrounded absolutely everything, that it can actually be quite difficult to get out of. So I'm not good at it.
And as Afia said as well, it's conscience. You want to do well, you want to do a good job, so you want to be connected to your emails. There might be a story there might be work.
Yeah.
I'm just going to stop it there because I need to check my emails. But before we move on, I want a quick roundup of some of your favourite childhood foods. This is going to make you so hungry, you three. Have a listen to these. I want your reaction to each of them. Anne in Pool U says, my gran used to make spam and egg pie, homemade short crust pastry, slices of spam, a few eggs mixed in and baked in the oven. Oh, dense, salty and absolutely delicious. Might make one this weekend. Do you fancy that? Ewan?
No.
Yeah, no, sorry, Anne, it's a no from them. No. Robin Rue says, bubble and squeak with brown sauce. Now, I'm not normally a brown sauce person, but what do you think, Ewan? Would you take that?
What is that?
Bubble and squeak. What is it? Oh God, what is bubble and squeak? Cabbage, onions, potato. I can't remember.
Ham, I think, as well.
No.
That's an interesting combo.
Okay, right. Here's the last one. Anne says, a lamb biryani. The hairy bikers have a great recipe for it.
Yeah.
I'm all over that one. Okay, and it's a major thumbs up to that.
What's getting you talking? This is Shereen.
Finally today, the mercury is set to hit 17 degrees in Aberdeen later today. If that's accompanied by a hint of sunshine, it might just qualify as taps-off, maybe? Well, according to a survey published this week, that might annoy 3/4 of us who've apparently said that they find seeing men stripped to the waist unacceptable. A third said that unless at a beach or by the pool, it should be banned. And Afia, I think that you would have rather traumatic experience of this just yesterday.
Just yesterday, doing back to school shopping with Naima, we were in a shopping centre and this guy was like barreling through the shopping centre like Terminator 2 with nothing on but a pair of budgie smugglers. And I was like, I'd literally
at the
had
shopping
to
centre.
Can you imagine? I had to cover my daughter's eyes because she was like, "Mum, what's going on?" And I was like, "Nothing to see here." Oh, it was awful. I don't know why people do that.
Right.
There's absolutely no need for it at all.
So are you with the ban people, or just that it's unacceptable?
I'm with the ban. Because listen, Shereen, if I was walking around 17 degrees with my top off, there would be complaints. So let's just not do that.
Very quickly, Brian.
I think there's a problem if the jails weren't overflowing at this moment in time. I think I would probably suggest that, because there's nothing you don't want to see some blubbery, tattooed, gigantic shape walk along and expose himself to you. And nor do you want to see the perfect honed physical shape either, because that just makes you feel insignificant.
Right, okay. Well, Tad in St Andrews says 18 degrees, is that all? Taps off? For me, that's sweatshirts on. Well, it just depends if you feel the cold or not. Anyway, I'm looking outside and the rain's come on again. So it's probably not even an issue for us in Glasgow. Afia, enjoy the rest of your honeymoon weekend or your anniversary weekend. We're back next week. It's Breaking the News now. Have a great weekend. Bye.